GFOA. Jackie, are you walking us through that, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
So for Mike and Alex, you were both here last year. We did our first GFOA budget document last year for FY18. And the GFOA budget document is a product of the Government Finance Officers Association, which is an organization that sets best practice standards for different financial policies and also for budget documents, particularly in regards to budget documents that are good communication tools and that provide a lot of transparency for residents so that they can see all of the materials that their public officials are using to make decisions during the budget process. So last year we started an initial version at the end of the process and put it together and submitted it to the GFOA to get feedback, to see where we needed to improve, to see what parts of our budget document were starting to meet their criteria, which is included in your packet, and where we could do a better job. And so this year we're finishing up the FY19 version using the feedback that we received last year. They require you to do a self-evaluation, and that was pretty scathing because I did it and I had done the document. So trying to find places where I knew that I felt like that we had weaknesses in the formatting of the document, in terms of really simple things like page numbering and strong table of contents that really can make or break a citizen's ability to find something in the budget document. That's a really basic thing, but if it's done not as well with a document of this scale, which ends up being 400 or 500 pages at the end of the process, that can make a real obstacle for residents finding the information that they're looking for. So I just wanted to walk through with you guys, what the GFOA is about, because this year Peter and I have talked about it, and we're going to be able to be in, I think, good enough shape with the FY19 version that during the FY 2020 budget process, which is, creeping up really fast.
Just around the corner. Yeah. You got your breather.
Threatening.
Yeah. Don't worry, we won't talk about it in July. It'll be
August, even if it's August 1st.
It's a great day either way, though. Because it's my birthday, but anyway. I knew that.
Well, we're definitely doing it that night then.
I was at the Selectmen's meeting last year on my birthday. It was very nice. This year we'll be able to hopefully have the document in good enough shape that we'll be able to start assembling it during the budget process and have it be updated live online, so that as the selectmen and then the finance committee hit different points in the budget approval process, we'll be able to keep uploading, starting with the forecasting documents, and then we'll get into the departmental budgets and the capital improvement program, so that as the selectmen and the finance and advisory committee are seeing that material, the GFOA, which encompasses all of the materials and the memos and the Excel spreadsheets, that will be in the GFOA document getting updated as the process goes along, so residents can really follow along with what you guys are reviewing at every meeting, the documents that you're seeing, and can see the transition from different committees and through the process, so that by the time we get to town meeting, about a month before town meeting, we close out the warrant book, we close out the annual report, those go off to the printer and they go online, and when those two documents go online, this will go online in its final version and then would be submitted to GFOA only after town meeting in case there were changes during town meeting approval. So it's a document that really focuses on transparency, on using the budget as a communication tool and as a policy statement, a statement of goals, a statement of priorities, and for each department seeing where they have been in the last year. We've tried to make it very easy for department heads over the last 2 years as we've had them submit things to the annual report and to the budget narrative process. Those items actually get pulled into GFOA, and there's some sample drafts of the two departments I work with and the town clerk towards the back of this packet here, so that you can see all the different pieces that each department will have included in the GFOA. And these are things that the department heads are doing at different points in the process. So as they do these items for the annual report and for the budget narratives in November, those will also get added to this document so that it's a final version. Another fun part of this document is that we have a newly finalized organizational chart of the entire town, and then each individual department will have an organizational chart for their particular department as a part of this as well, so that residents, instead of just seeing the line items with the positions, they can also see the structure of the department and see the programs and services, and basically have all of the information that they'd find in multiple town documents in one place. So it's kind of an ease of access in particular for the residents, but with materials that we're already creating during the budget process, there's not a lot of new material that goes into the GFOA. It's a lot of material that's just being reformatted and retooled to meet their criteria. And if anyone doesn't have any questions, I can speak a little bit to the criteria, because you've also got a copy of their criteria guide in your packet. Oh, yes.
I have some questions, just sitting down after this has already started.
Go right ahead.
And is there a town of Wenham, like, longer term? So I've looked at prior years of these, and I think we've talked about this before. I just need my memory refreshed. Is there a, I see the initiatives and accomplishments and the goals and initiatives, and they're 1 year base. Is there like a 5 or 10 year strategic plan for the town of Wenham that this is, in the context of?
There isn't. So one thing relatively early on starting here that was talked about was the need for a master plan.
Yep.
That's nothing that Wenham has ever had. I think we're, over the past few years, have been working in a number of different parallel tracks on that. So updating our open space and recreation plan,
Yep.
nearing completion of that affordable housing needs assessment and action plan rolling out in the next few weeks. We have a forum on that next week. So that will be updated. We've gone through the capital improvement planning process. So that's going to be new. Our hazard mitigation plan is expired. We got grant funding to update that, so we're working on that. Similarly, the age and dementia friendly community initiative that the Council on Aging is working on.
Yep.
They're doing a needs assessment and an action plan over the next year themselves. And then we also got grant funding to do a resident survey and get some input from the residents in terms of what they're looking for needs and priorities. All of that then sets a great foundation to move forward with a master plan.
Yeah, because ideally, that's awesome, because there's lots of pieces to the puzzle of Wenham, and you're getting all the pieces filled in, so to speak. So, and ideally, our budget would reflect priorities set out in all those pieces, which would also be reflected in a master plan.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to put this into a kind of a broader context.
Yeah, and I think right now there's annual goal setting, certainly that takes place at the departmental level, but it's not, to your point, necessarily fully integrated strategically across the organization and meeting resident needs in all those areas. I think that's something, much like this document has been aspirational over the past few years, and we've made a lot of good headway there.
Absolutely, that's obvious.
I think that once, quite honestly, we have all those other plans updated in the next year, I would think we'd be talking about moving forward with a master planning process, which in itself takes a year plus start to finish. But then the budget process is going to be informed, by what those priorities are and what those needs are.
And it seems like, from the bottom-up perspective also, it seems like the departments have, like the capital improvement plan is definitely mapped out over several years. It seems like the departments have multi-year priorities that currently feed the budget.
Yeah, I'd say
Not
generally.
part of this overarching kind of top-down priority.
I'd say generally, most of the departmental need is reflected in the capital improvement program. In terms of services that we provide, for the most part, based on our budgetary constraints, we're treading water. We're providing level services budget, much like the conversation that the school district had last year, where they said we've been providing level services for a number of years now. we need to at least have a conversation about these, you know, broader initiatives.
Strategic
Yeah,
initiatives, yeah.
I think that's probably will be an outcome of this process, is really
Okay.
trying to identify what we're doing and where we should be focusing our whatever limited resources we have in terms of staffing and services.
So roughly, like 3 years from now, there might be a master plan?
I would say that's probably a fair conservative. Yeah, I mean, I would think we wouldn't start it until next summer at the
And
earliest.
how long is your contract?
Oh my God, that's ominous lightning.
Yeah, I know. Drum roll, please.
You don't have to answer that. That was not, you don't have to answer that.
But I think, Carrie, too, to also your point, I think in terms of providing context, I think this document, you know, is based on one single fiscal year, but it will also provide context to folks who are checking into the process
Oh,
like
yeah,
once
for
a
that
year.
year. Yeah.
Because in the final version of the document, which unfortunately I did not print for you because it's 500
No, that's
pages
fine.
at its best.
I have last year's that's
Yeah, last year's is
300 pages.
almost,
Last
yeah.
year's was the first
Yeah.
Yeah, first.
run through.
Yeah, no,
Um,
it's good to kind of crosswalk people from all the spreadsheets that we have at town hall to what is the meat on these bones.
And I also think it shows, like, something that Leslie's been working on is getting all the financial policies updated. So those are included in this document. You know, the forecasting presentation that Peter and Leslie put together at the beginning of the process gets included because it's showing that initial forecasting piece. It's showing the context of the financial policies around the decision making. And it's also showing, you know, the departmental requests. So it's trying to get like a full scoped version of the budget, for residents who are checking in, checking out. We've added an updated glossary of terms. You know, the one in the warrant book we increased to 2 pages this year, but the glossary of terms in the GFOA this year is going up to 12 pages. So that, you know, something as simple as HWRSD, if you're new to Wenham, can be, you know, that's an unfamiliar term. If, you know, a lot of you were at the Citizens Academy when I call people out on the jargon. I'm the jargon police. I did it to Leslie. She was a very good sport when I had asked her what the GL was, and she told us it was the general ledger. And then I said, well, what's the general ledger? And I think this document is working to break down those barriers for people who aren't consistently looking.
Yeah.
I might have missed this, but how does the school budget get folded into this process?
Quite honestly, they're treated in most of these budget documents that are developed other Massachusetts and communities and around the country as a discrete department.
No, I know that.
Have a page and,
right,
yeah.
right. But is there an opportunity at some point in this process to fold in where the school, like when did we have our meetings, in January, for example? Can that get folded in somehow? Because it's such a significant piece of decision-making in dollars for our community.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was, sorry, go ahead.
No, no.
Well, I mean, we had discussion and requests, and like I said, we aspire in future years to work together more closely with Hamilton and the school district, for example, on capital planning.
Right.
Because right now, it's my understanding, it's not really as integrated a process, but there could be
No,
prioritization and economies of scale.
I'm
Yeah.
probably being a little concrete. I was wondering if that could ever get folded into the GF process here, and
Ultimately, the best.
or is it not structured that way?
Yeah, I mean, those are more policy discussions where this budget document is intended as a communication tool. It's really meant to be, as we go through the process, but it's certainly at the end of the process, to communicate out more clearly, more thoroughly to the residents what's happening with our budget and why and how we got there, and some of the real detail in terms of what that means for staffing and services and relating back. But
Jackie, how do residents get the GFOA document? It's on the website.
Currently, it's on the website. It's a hefty. I mean, it's 3 times the size of the annual report and the warrant book together.
Yeah.
So it would be a challenge, I think, you know, to print it in the way we do the other 2 documents.
Not
But I
advised,
think
yeah.
we tried to have copies around town hall last year after we had finalized it, and I think this year we would try to have copies available as well. But I think it's going to be a mostly online release so far with this, just because of the cost of printing is
Yeah,
a challenge.
We want to rein that in.
Yeah, and we're trying to, like, you know, every year we go through the annual report, like trying to make sure that folks are sticking to a page and that, you know, there's content and there's pictures, but we're also being kind to the bottom line of printing those documents. So I think for now, I mean, it would be great in future and someday that like everyone got a copy of this at their house. But I think we are in a place where people are accessing these documents more and more online as well.
And the hope in starting, you know, to integrate it into our budget process at the beginning is that it will be something that's more easily referenced as opposed to kind of being done after the fact.
Right.
You know, and so really trying to use it as more of a informational tool for residents.
Right, so we should stay close to the overarching document that assembles all of these pieces that we are so familiar with, so that along the way we can kind of promote it and be aware of what people are. I mean, I get that it's a user, like the criteria make it such that it's user-friendly, which isn't what comes to mind when you think 320 pages as a web document. If the, you know, table of contents is neatly integrated with Adobe, then I'm sure it's usable to the extent that residents can take the time to learn the structure of the document.
Well, and I think it's also a tool too that, you know, breaking it down into sections might be how we approach it online as well, of like, here's the financial policy section, here's the forecasting section.
Point.
So I think to me, like in seeing it posted, there's the one whole document version, but then there's also the subsections, because something like the financial policies aren't going to change with every budget cycle. Those are going to be, you know, what they are, and when they get updated, we'll update them. And once the financial policies are done, you know, they're kind of there. And I think, Alex, to your point, is that there's kind of a twofold goal. Is that one, it's supposed to help residents who want to know more and want to access more, but at the same time, the criteria can also be a really good tool for us because it's helping us to find gaps in what we're doing. You know, Carrie brought up a really good point about, you know, well, I only see the 1 year goals, and that's actually one of the criteria points that we received feedback on, is that, you know, your department heads are only getting, I only see in the document the 1 year goal setting, and so that's something that it's a tool for residents, but it's also can be a tool for the people working on the budget process to say, like, where can we do better in terms of, you know, having information and making decisions and putting things out to the public. So I think there's a dual goal there, for sure, as a tool for residents, but also as a tool for people who are making the decisions.
No, it's great. I mean, as Peter mentioned, there's 5 or 6 large initiatives underway to kind of form the basis of what will be the master plan. It's not like the work hasn't been thought through in many cases, but they're discrete projects, which, when integrated, if they and other work form a master plan, this might reference, you know, pieces of it, but it would just be so massive if someone was trying to learn more about the budget process or the inner workings of the town, but not every single piece of it. To have it kind of chunked out might make sense in a way too. Break it apart.
And they can always join us at the Citizens Academy starting the second week of September too. I'm just gonna start plugging that one now.
Third year?
Sorry, third year.
Cool.
So that's another fun way to learn about it too. If you would rather not look at a 500-page document and instead come and join us at Town Hall. So
I'm gonna Citizens Academy participants help draft it.
Sorry?
You could have the Citizens Academy participants help
That's
draft
so
it.
true. Yeah, put them to
Homework.
work, you know.
Yeah.
I've really stayed away from homework with the Citizens Academy. I think it's hard enough to pull people out of their houses the one night a week for, you know, an hour and a half to 2 hours to learn about municipal government. I don't think we're gonna go towards homework. I think
With the dedication I saw, they might have actually been up for it, though. People were really involved.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Carrie would have done the homework for sure, because she's one of those people that participated every week. But
well, there was candy, so
that's super true. Leslie threw it into the crowd. It was great. Yeah. But thank you guys for
Thank you.
allowing me to speak to it.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, next up we've got RFTs. So first, reserve fund transfer. Bless you, Mike. Street tree removal, pruning and planting plan along with it.
Yep, so the first one is the street tree removal of, requesting a reserve fund transfer of $25,000. Or do you want to explain a little bit more?
Yeah, so I sent out some information. You may
It's
remember.
It's in your packet, too.
Yeah, in your
so-
packet. This
So,
is,
yep,
Bill?
the cover memo.
it's right underneath you.
Yeah, so, may recall, we had this conversation, back in December. At the time, we'd gotten $5,000 in grant funding, from Maya, the town's insurance provider, through their risk management grant program to do a street tree inventory. Needed some matching funds, so the, finance committee had approved an RFP for just over $6,000 to complete that work. I included the executive summary of their report. It's a pretty substantial document, start to finish, about 200 pages. But Bartlett Tree came in February with a couple arborists and went around town on our major streets. So Walnut, Larch, Grapevine, Dodges Row, Arbor Street, Monument, Cherry, Maple, and Topsfield Road. And looked at the 300 plus street trees on those main streets. And the feedback essentially was almost half of them were recommended for removal based on their condition. And the rest, 55%, required some kind of pruning maintenance program. So pretty daunting task ahead of us, certainly, both from a financial perspective and in terms of the aesthetic impact on all of our corridors. And so at this point, given kind of where we are at the end of the fiscal year and where we were relative to the reserve fund balance, when I brought this up with the selectmen a few weeks ago now, they had suggested that an RFT might be in order. The FY, you can see in Bill Tyak's memo, after much discussion, ultimately, the tree removal budget has remained the same, FY 17, 18, and 19, just over $25,000. It's been maxed out in 17 and 18, and DPW expense actually covered an additional $16,000 in tree removal costs in FY 17, over $10,000 this year so far for tree removals above that $25,000 amount. So clearly the line item has been under budgeted, and again for FY 19 it's still set at that same number. So we thought it was an opportunity, especially based on the results of the report, to suggest some additional funding to do two things. One, keep up with some of the high hazard tree removals to the tune of $14,000, and the other, much talked about,
Planting?
starting with tree plantings. So $10,000 for tree plantings, which essentially, based on our initial estimates, will result in 20 new street trees planted by next June, and that's the DPW doing the actual planting work in-house, so about $500 a tree. And some of the locations where trees are coming down or have come down, you know, in terms of where the plantings are gonna go. But that's really kind of what Bill felt that he could commit to in terms of his workload, was the 10 trees in the fall, 10 trees in the spring. And then hopefully, depending on where we are again next year, with the reserve fund, having the conversation again before the end of the fiscal year and trying to continue to chunk away at it, excuse me. So, Win Mulvey's here, tree warden, if anybody has any particular questions about species and locations and all of that. But that's kind of high level what we're talking about.
Cool.
Does the town get, this is my typical question, does the town get any credits on our general liability insurance for taking an aggressive, forward-looking to take down dangerous trees?
Not to my knowledge, I don't believe so.
You know what I'm trying?
I do.
Trying to get to kind of?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so they, right, so we got the grant funding from our insurance provider,
Oh,
presumably for a reason. That was the $5,000 in grant funding, so they're incentivizing us.
so they're recognizing and
They're- yeah, they're-
throwing some money into the
Little bit of money,
budget, a little
making it-
bit of,
yeah.
a few bucks.
I mean, so the town did file a claim over the winter months for some catastrophic damage that happened to a 3-bay garage out at the Iron Rail property, DPW storage barn that was out there that got hit by multiple trees. So we filed a claim for that. New garage being constructed as we speak. And so I think it was in response to the fact that we've had these claims coming in, and it's clearly between the past 2 winters with all the severe weather and the like, it's been even harder than it has been kind of historically. So.
Peter, out of curiosity, you said there was a more detailed part of this report in terms of, just more of curiosity.
Yeah, so I
Is it online or?
I emailed it to you as a PDF this afternoon, the 200-page document. I included the copy of the executive summary, 15
Thank you.
pages.
Thank you.
for
I
this.
confess I didn't read it.
And I'm glad you pointed out there's more detail than what's here, because
Just another one,
That's
other
great.
quick question.
Thank you.
People get attached to
Yeah.
trees,
Yeah.
even if they're on town property, you know. Is there gonna be a system for letting people know what's being pruned or taken down before?
I think that's something that,
Communicating around
I
that?
think that's something that absolutely needs to be addressed before, I mean, we've been taking down, upwards of $25,000 of trees in the past many years.
Right.
And we haven't necessarily had a system of notifying residents up to this point. But if we're talking about doubling our budget and really going down our main corridors
Just a thought.
and doing removals, I agree. I think it's something that we need to do and go through that public process.
good idea. And to level set expectations as to whether or not there's a replacement, because there may not be, of
Right.
course, right away.
Right.
I think most people are happy to see a dead,
A dead tree go.
yeah, absolutely.
hurting tree that's obviously a risk.
But a lot of people
Taken
don't know if
down.
a tree is dead or not.
That's true.
You can look at a tree and say, oh, it's
Yeah.
leafing, and but you core into it, and it's not a healthy
Yeah.
plant.
How many how many trees are included on or thought to cost 14,000 to take down?
It's sadly not that many.
I mean, I would guess around 14.
No, it's less.
Not even? Yeah, I was hoping for an average of $1,000.
Trees on,
It's expensive.
what is it, grapevine,
Yep.
just very large and dead. I mean, that's one of the issues we're dealing with. We have such a high, large, mature
Yes.
trees
Yeah.
in town. I mean, we live in the woods, so
Yep.
it's challenging, but, I mean, that's gonna be
Yeah.
an almost $8,000 bill for 3 large oak trees.
Not
that-
surprised, yeah.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say six
So-
to eight's more
Yeah.
realistic.
Firewood?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, you could have some that are equally dangerous with some limbs going out over the main roads, ready to fall, as we saw in the storm, that happened this winter, and not be as massive, but that's not a surprise.
And we continue, I know Win works with National Grid to the greatest extent possible to try to leverage their resources, when they're doing utility work and the like, and so we certainly try to take advantage of that as
And-
much as we can, as much we can.
So Bill's team is not taking these down though, right?
No,
We
these
only
are all
respond to
removals
those,
that
right.
require, I mean,
Tree
he
companies
can
come
do
in.
minor limb removals and
Right.
kind of getting streets clear during storms.
And when it's already down,
Correct.
when nature takes it down, they do clean it up.
Yeah, for the most part,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. It's great to see. And I'd missed the 10 plantings in the spring, so I thought, okay, 10 trees, but now it's 20.
20.
Yeah, or it was 20. That's great. The presidents will be happy to see that. And how does this fit as part of the larger plan for the tree survey? It's just, as you said, Peter, it's continue to go forward. It's each year we know we'll have more to take down than we can afford to do for quite some time. We'll continue planting at a pace we can afford according to some plans from the tree survey, right?
Yeah,
In
and
terms
it's
of-
It's an online, and with Sheila, who we VA is handling that aspect of it, but I mean, this covers a lot of the major roads in town, and if at some point, I mean, this is really only gonna be a drop in the bucket to
Right.
kind of alleviate some of the concerns about these. So at some point in time, another grant is approved, and we go forward and have Bartlett do another survey that they can put on their online tool, and that we can manage appropriately by, you know, removals, new plantings in place, and, you know, all that will be accessible by townspeople. So I think this is just really some good hard fact information for everybody, and possibly getting some numbers together, but, yeah.
Because it is difficult with such a limited budget,
Yeah.
and so many trees needing removal.
Other
a lot-
priorities, yeah.
Well, it's hard when, you know, there are, you know, resident requests and it's important to them, and so it's hard to not be responsive, but also balancing that with, you know, some of the, like I said, more high hazard trees that are out there, so.
So are we allowing for, like if you have to take out some huge trees and you need a giant crane, economies of scale, like there's 3 trees that are, you know, urgently need to be taken out, and these 3 next to it probably need to come down in a year anyway, so you just do all 6? Because getting the big crane in there is what costs most of the money.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest consideration in terms of economies of scale on that piece is actually coordinating police details and trying to do things at a, you know, specific location at a time while we've got them in town. So
It's like if it's 14,000 for 3 trees, it might be 15,000 for 5 trees.
yeah,
And I'm not suggesting cutting down trees that don't need to be cut down
Right, yep.
at all.
We get the truck,
Just
you get
because
the
you got
chipper there.
just because you got it there, let's cut some more down. I'm not suggesting that at all. But just because we live in the woods, we had this exact same issue, and I was shocked. It was like $1,000 to cut down like 5 more dead trees, and bulk of the cost was just to get the crane there.
yeah. When we get them in town, I know Win and Bill try to get as much squeezed out of their time while they're here as
Okay.
possible, for sure. And I know, you know, we've gone through you know, we've solicited quotes from a variety of companies, and we're trying to get, you know, the most bang for our buck.
Okay. We're voting on these independently, right? Okay, thank you. Any other questions? For Wayne or Peter or Leslie? Okay, then, I'm looking, this is our specifics here, right? We go off of?
Yeah, that's the detail sheet, so.
Okay. All right, so then, I guess I'll move that we approve, is there specific language, or am I just giving it a go and you tell me where I need to change it?
No, 25.
Move that we approve the reserve fund transfer in the amount of $25,000 for continued removal of street trees and as along with pruning and planting.
Second?
Thank you.
The motion?
Any other questions? Nope. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Alex, I have a question for the minutes. Usually I put what account's going into for the minutes. Is that still important to do or no?
I don't have an account number, but I'm happy to,
The tree,
Powers
Do I?
that included or
it's the
not.
tree warden expense. I don't have the account number with me. I put tree
Well,
warden.
the-
Tree warden.
Tree warden.
Thank you.
Cool. So next one is for
For,
legal,
yep,
legal
outside
costs.
legal costs.
Yep.
Requesting a reserve fund transfer of $20,000 for some unforeseen litigation with Wenham Pines and the additional town meeting that we had.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Nothing in here on that,
Do we
right?
have
Just
any info?
Yeah, so
There's-
the context I can give is, over the past several years, our actuals for legal, FY15 was $90,000, FY16 was $88,000, last year was 68, and right now we're projected to come in at 70. We budgeted 50 for this year. For next fiscal year, we did bump that up to $55,000. You know, legal honestly is a little variable depending on, for the most part, the costs are driven by land use decisions and appeals on those issues. And this year, like Leslie referenced, Wenham Pines was the big one. As you can see, there's actually some site work being done there at this point, which is good news. It was a long process, start to finish, and then there were some additional costs associated with having that second town meeting and the prep and time that went into that.
That there was. Okay. Cool. So be it. All right, well, I will move that we approve a reserve fund transfer in the amount of $20,000 to
Outside legal.
outside legal.
I'll second.
Thanks, David. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, could you just give a quick overview of what the legal issue was or is at Wenham Pines? I don't know what it was about.
Yeah, so actually in that particular case, there wasn't any litigation involved. It was merely going through the process with their legal team and town council to make sure that, so they went through the permitting process, and then we had a host community agreement that the Board of Selectmen had negotiated early on in the process, and so there was a fair amount of work to be done just to ensure that they met all the requirements of the host community agreement before the town Board of Selectmen voted to release our right of first refusal to purchase the property. So that was a process that started 2 years ago, well, almost 2.5 years ago now at this point, and so it was really just working through that to get to the point where that vote could be taken.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, I guess we'll go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Which brings us to the next RFT, refuse.
Not as big
I
as last
refuse,
year,
I
right?
refuse this RFT personally.
So we're requesting RFT of $21,000 for refuse, for increased recycling rates, higher usage, resulting in some increased monthly costs.
Get those big barrels.
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
What's
I missed
that?
the last part.
21,000, increased in recycling rates and higher usage resulting in some increased monthly costs.
Got it.
Didn't we have a contract with them that was set?
We do have a contract which is set. The one new element, if you will remember, that is variable based on market conditions is recycling disposal. When we had a contract with Hiltz, before they went bankrupt, third bankruptcy, we had a $0 contract with them for recycling disposal, and sometimes they came out ahead on it, sometimes they didn't. But ultimately, near the end of our contract with them, they obviously weren't. And so that's an additional cost that we took on under this contract, and we projected out, if you can think back, kind of budgetarily.
Yeah, it was like 100,000, wasn't it?
Right, but when we did that was January of 17. And in the past 6 months in particular, you may have heard out there in papers and elsewhere that the Chinese government implemented the national sword policy, part of a larger trade issue between the two countries, and the net result of that to the town has been that in the past, again, since December or so, our recycling disposal costs, which have been about a wash in the first year plus of our contract with Casella, have cost the town $2,500 to $3,000 a month in additional expenses. So that's really where most of this request is coming from, is from that. There's been a slight increase in overall tonnage across the three areas.
But it's mostly rate increase.
But it's mostly the recycling disposal rate increase. And we did bump up because we were starting to feel the impacts of these increases right as we were wrapping up the budget process. You may remember we ended up bumping up this line item, this expense line for FY19. So it's increasing from 18 to 19, $21,000 in anticipation of where we might be. That being said, I think we probably, based on where we are now, just what's happened in the past few months, I think we're going to be very tight for FY19, even at that $386,000 that we budgeted. The state has, in the past couple months, changed their policies such that we receive a few $1,000s a year through their recycling dividends program, which is essentially DEP recognizing the good work that we're doing in terms of taking tonnage out of trash and shifting it to recycling and organics. And so they are allowing us to use those grant funds, which are annually awarded based on the programs and that we do, to help subsidize, to keep those costs down. But for us, it's pennies on the dollar. But it's something we may dig into in the next year, just to try to mitigate the impacts.
Do you know offhand of the total solid waste disposed, what the ratios are between recycling, garbage, and compost?
Yeah, so in a given fiscal year, I'd say our diversion rate is right around 40%, which basically means that of all of our trash that's disposed of, that or solid waste is about 60%, and then recycling and organics are the other 40%.
By weight, yeah.
By weight. Yep.
Surprised it's not higher.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have one of the few still curbside weekly organic programs in the state. We were the first at the time it was rolled out, and I think we're still really the poster child for that. It works for us, especially logistically, because Brookends is here in town.
Yep.
Not everybody has that kind of setup.
Is the organic adding to the, because that's, we process that locally, at least.
The Brookends
Yeah.
farm, in Hamilton.
So that doesn't impact on this cost.
So we do pay for organics, but it's at a much lower rate than certainly solid waste or recycling. What's a challenging national issue is that for many, many years, recycling was significantly cheaper than disposing solid waste. And now we've reached a tipping point with this new policy where it's actually more expensive to dispose of recycled goods than it is your standard solid waste. So we're paying just over $60 a ton for solid waste, and we're in the 70 plus for recycling. So what made good policy sense and fiscal sense was always aligned. Now there's going to be some friction between those two. So the state's trying to do a lot in terms of education and outreach, but ultimately, these Casella, manages the recycling processing plant down in Charlestown, and talking to their executives, they'd have to invest literally tens, if not hundreds of $1 millions into their plant to meet the new standards. So it's unlikely to happen. And all the local processing plants, local being American processing plants, have long since shut down because they couldn't compete with the foreign markets. So there's no real end in sight, unfortunately. But we are not alone by any means.
Well, the Globe had a number of articles on it in the business section.
Yeah.
And it seems to be there's no end in sight of this thing. One of the issues, if I remember, and I don't know if it impacts locally, is that creeping up over the years into the recycling is materials and some organics that shouldn't be part of the recycling, which has closed down. The Chinese market has impacted the Chinese market. That people are throwing into recyclable stuff, some food, and they get, pizza, for example. I don't know whether there's an education opportunity, or whether that doesn't make any difference for us, just for the town of Wenham.
Yeah, I think education's always good, and that's certainly what the state's pushing, honestly, because there's not a lot of alternatives that they have at their disposal right now. But I think ultimately, if Wenham did an A+ job,
Wouldn't make much
it
of
wouldn't impact our
Yeah.
rate because it's
Right.
going to the same
Same
treatment
place,
processing plant as where everybody else is. So,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of an end person dilemma there.
Mhm. Big bucks. Trash. All right, any other questions?
No.
On refuse? Nope. All right, then, I move that FinCom approve the reserve fund transfer in the amount of $21,000 to cover additional refuse costs to
refuse, yeah.
refuse.
Mhm.
Second.
Thanks, Mike.
So moved.
All right, all in favor?
And so just a synopsis of the
Yes.
reserve fund transfers, as you see where we've, with these approved transfers, we spent $87,604, leaving us with $37,396, which is about 70% of the $125,000 we budgeted for FY18, and we are close to the end of the fiscal year with 2 weeks to go. So.
Whatever isn't spent drops out to free
Free
cash.
cash, yep.
Part of the year-end
Yep.
process.
Right.
Is there usually extra, or are we usually pretty right on?
Depends on the year,
Depends on the
right?
year, okay.
So last year, we needed a very significant RFT relatively early on to take on the new contract with Casella. When Tilts went out of business. And so we were scrimping and scrounging, to be honest, to get through, I forget what the year-end balance was, but I feel like it was $20,000 or
Yeah.
less, and that was pretty much the balance all the way through.
Right.
So it's intended to deal with, unforeseen, emergency costs, and that's really what it's used for.
Mm.
Okay, thank you.
Just for my own clarification, what is the number we're voting on here? Is it the 37,396?
No, that's just the remaining balance in the,
Okay.
yeah, you voted on the 3 RFTs,
Yeah.
which left us a balance in the reserve fund transfer as of today, June 18th, of $37,396. I was just giving a synopsis
Oh.
of what's left of the reserve fund transfer for FY18.
And that rolls over into the next fiscal year.
Right, so if we have no more reserve fund transfers, it won't roll over, it goes to free cash.
Free cash.
Free
okay.
cash. So just under 40,000.
Do you anticipate
More
anything
likely drop
else?
to free cash.
Do you
Excuse me?
anticipate anything else?
No.
You never know, but hopefully not.
I don't anticipate.
Hopefully we're not back here in a week.
I was gonna say, we got a week and a half left. Let's hope
Never
not.
know. But
Got it.
What was that?
I'm just thinking about like the machinations of this. Do you typically make sure it's an urgent need? I mean, do you ever just zero out the reserve fund for a need? Or you could just as easily let it roll over to free cash and apply the free cash to that need in a month?
Yeah, so there's
Does that make sense?
DOR guidance on use of reserve funds,
Uh-huh.
and we try to adhere to that. It's consistent
Okay.
with our financial policies. So it really is for, it can't be used for something, we can't plan to use it every year for a specific purpose or anything like that.
Like if we have all these tree demands to, remove and plant trees, and you could argue it's urgent if a lot of them need to be cut down, why not just, I guess you want to keep it in case something happens in the next,
Right.
between now and the end of the fiscal
Yeah.
year.
It's supposed to be unforeseen.
Is about,
Right.
yeah.
And, really absent having funding in that reserve fund, if something catastrophic were to happen,
Yeah, you don't wanna
we would
zero
have to
it
call a
out.
special town
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
And given where we are relative to the levy,
Yeah.
that funding request would be an override or debt exclusion.
Okay.
So I think we want to definitely be conservative.
Yeah,
and-
I'm just
and,
trying to understand how you move the funds around at certain times of the year, so that makes sense.
And I think also, the fact that we got the report from Bartlett Tree relatively recently. I think we all thought that our situation with hazard trees was problematic. I don't think we thought it was as bad as what they were telling us, quite honestly.
Yeah, that happened to us.
Yeah, we're in takedown mode too.
One tree turned into 20. They were like hollow if you stuck a
Really?
rod through it, like he was saying. That doesn't help me in my trees.
Oh, no, we want to hear more. So we on to appropriation transfers?
Yes.
Okay.
So in your packet, there's a memo along with the detail information about the year end. And just some background, just in case you don't know the history of it. In November of 2016, the Municipal Modernization Act was passed, where prior to this, the year-end transfers were, it was the same as the last 2 months of the fiscal year and the first 15 days of the next year that you can make any transfers, go into deficit and make transfers for year-end. But you were only able to transfer between the expense accounts within your department, and it was 3% or $5,000. Now with the new law, with the Modernization Act, we can go ahead and transfer from any accounts for whatever the amounts are, so as long as we have those in the accounts. So in the memo it's listed, but I can go down through it just for the record. If you want me to list everything out, read them?
Yeah, we could just look them over and maybe see
Well, I'll
if we
tell
have
you it's the
questions
total,
on.
so I mean, I don't know if you want me to go to each one on the page, but anyways, we're asking for your total of appropriation transfers of $75,839.83.
So the police captain transition, is that from,
It was the hiring of the captain, and we had a
Partial,
acting
yeah.
captain, so they were kind of
I remember now.
transitioning together, right, Peter?
Yeah,
They were
exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
We-
offset by the,
Yeah,
We had a new captain coming in from the outside for the first time, and so there was a
cross.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's some cross training that occurred, and so that resulted in those costs.
and the other biggie on fire on-call wages of 20,000.
That's a transfer.
No, that's a
from-
transfer.
I know, that's what I'm
Oh.
saying, so that reflects reduced on-call payments, right?
Right, so what I did here mostly is, as you can see, I used the unemployment, the extra money that we had in employee benefits for, the savings with the GIC and that. We really didn't have enough, but they have a little abundance in, a little bit more money in the call wages, so we were able to use that. The number looks pretty good right now.
And you may remember for FY19, we actually reduced that call firefighter line by, I think, $25,000 or
Right.
$30,000 from 18 to
25.
19,
Yeah,
and that was based on
the excesses that were,
some actuals and just kind of trying to be realistic in terms
Yep.
of what we can expect.
and we're able to transfer from even in, well, that's for, of course, FY18,
Correct.
right? Yeah,
Correct.
okay, in FY19,
Right.
we
When
wouldn't
we have
expect to be
one more
doing this again.
payroll, so knowing
Yeah.
what we have for a balance,
Pretty,
we'll be
pretty
fine.
close, yeah,
Yes.
cool.
Mhm.
I'm good.
Good. Any other questions on these transfers, appropriations?
No.
All right. So, I move that FinCom approve the list of year-end appropriation transfers as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any other questions? All in favor? Thank you. You. Totally. We've got one more thing, and that is, I think, a one-pager minutes from our second town meeting attempt. No, actually, second town meeting, which Catherine was kind enough to put together way back, what feels like a lifetime ago in April. So this is our reconvening and basic, obviously, we met with town council, we talked through the debt exclusion vote implications and kind of continuation of where we were going with our finance-related articles, and proceeded to carry on to town meeting and wrap it up.
Oh, I have to abstain, right, because I was not in attendance?
No, you don't actually have to abstain from approval of the meeting minutes if you weren't present at that session.
You're there one, right? Right.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't think you would need to vote on the minutes, but
Okay.
the rest of us will when good. Was it just us? I guess it was. Is that right? For this pre-meeting? Were you not?
2, 3.
I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I was in North Carolina.
That's right.
No, I was on my way back from North Carolina.
Yes.
In fact, I stopped by the school at about 8:45 when I got off the plane.
We almost didn't have quorum as well. But made it
We got
happen.
there. We made
We
it.
got there, yep. Thanks for texts. What's that?
Will we send these?
Catherine sent them earlier, but just where they're the same for BOS and for FinCom.
Okay.
She, I think, didn't send them to you for review for that reason, because they're
I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss.
straightforward. No, you didn't. You didn't miss them. All good with this?
Yes, sir.
Okay with this?
Yes.
Take your time if you want to.
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Move to approve the minutes from the April 23rd meeting of, this would have been joint with BOS and FinCom.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. That pretty much wraps it up. However, Leslie, this is your last meeting with us, which is not a good thing. That's
We can have another
terrible.
one if you'd like.
That's where it gets tricky. Because as much as we want to see you and work with you, continue to have you be our finance director for the town of Wenham, I don't think we have that option since you're moving on to island-type pastures.
Yes, I'm gonna take the boat up there.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be in the harbor, working remotely on
Yes, that's right.
some yacht,
Yeah,
I'm sure,
Exactly.
handling Marblehead's
Yes.
finances. But thank you so much. You have
Been great
been
working with you guys.
amazing
Yeah.
for all of us, for me and for Mike and the rest of the group, coming
Yeah.
on board to learn from you.
Hear
And
me laugh, just give me a
Give me a
call.
call.
you will be incredibly tough to replace.
Thank you,
And
Great.
we appreciate all that you've done for the town and for us
thanks.
on FinCom.
Yeah,
It's been awesome.
appreciate your
Great
Thank you.
contribution.
Thank
very professional, amazing expertise, and funny.
you. Yeah,
Yes.
all in one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So big shoes to fill. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. Thank you
And
for
all the
that.
best in Marblehead.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank you.
Yep. Come visit us.
I will. I will.
Now hey guys, now we have to pay attention to what's going on because Leslie's leaving.
I know.
What are you trying to say here?
Got to keep a close eye on Peter. All right. With that, then.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All right. All in favor?
All right.
Thank you.